Continuing our conversation about congruence, this concept that Virginia Satir focused a lot on regarding harmony of the inside and the outside, this integration or wholeness in terms of behavior and communication. And we were just talking a moment ago about how can, what is the relationship between the self, or what Virginia would describe as I am, the deep, deep, deep parts of ourselves where we identify our authentic self that lives. What's the relationship between that and congruence and congruent communication, congruent behavior? So why don't we try to explore that question and that relationship today?
Sure.
Where would you begin with that, Sharon?
It's just kind of, I have always known that Virginia called the spirit the I am. But I think it's only this week. With Virginia's stuff, it's like it takes me a long time to go, okay, that's what she's really meaning. Is that it's I am, period. It is not I am, a good speaker, or I am a bad listener.
Right.
There is no, all of those are adjectives.
Or nouns.
Or nouns. I heard a marvelous speaker recently who talked about the difference between what he called the universal mind and the little mind. I thought that was an interesting, because in my language it would be self in parts.
Yeah.
Or Virginia's it would be the I am or the spirit in parts, but it's that separation where the I am is not destroyable. It is perfect in and of itself. And that congruence is helping us more and more to be in that place of simply I am. I don't have to be anything other than who I am. And all the expectations, internal expectations and shoulds, all of that, and all of the characterizations of myself. And as I was saying, I was talking to somebody who had this huge light bulb by saying that she'd heard somebody say, I've been depressed lately. And she said, when this person said it, I had this awareness that she was expressing that as a depression that had come into her but was not her being. And that meant, because she didn't have to define herself as I am a bad person or I am fully depressed. I have a depression that has come into me. And I know there's a whole school of thought or model where they do a lot of externalizing around that. What's depression saying to you? That kind of thing.
Right. Narrative therapy.
It's that same process of beginning to understand our thoughts and our feelings are not us. That core place is in there. That nobody is there all the time, but that somehow the more and more we can land there, the more we feel in alignment with ourselves, but also it's easier for us to not be defensive in the world.
Yeah, I think that people do often identify themselves with their experience. I'm mad. I'm depressed. I'm scared. And then that becomes the whole of who they are. And then they're stuck in a particular reactive pattern, because I think that emotion becomes the filter through which they are then living. So mad becomes the impulse to want to yell or hit. Scared is to avoid. And when that's the filter, then you're not connected to the other resources that are there, right? Your wisdom, your courage, your love, and
Mm-hmm.
these other parts that I think are more
Mm-hmm.
integrated in the seed of the self, right?
Yes.
Because I think
Yes.
it's it's we're constantly evolving potentials.
Mm-hmm.
We're as long as we're alive, we're unfolding our lives through our bodies, through our relationships, through our environments. And
Mm-hmm.
when we make a conclusion, I think, and it's not I am period, it's I am depressed. We make a premature conclusion about our
Mm.
essence and our life
Ah,
process, and
yes.
then it stops certain things like compassion or curiosity about what's going on. The kind of energy I think that you need to engage in to expand uh, perception, to expand expectations, to really be present, to at a sensory level with the situation and with
Mm-hmm.
ourselves and with
Mm-hmm.
one another. And I think that is the utility and the power of mindfulness practice, which is to just be aware that there's different thought forms, to not be overly attached to them, to create a space between stimulus and the response that
Mm-hmm.
we have,
Mm-hmm.
and to be able to have a different relationships with thinking, because
Mm-hmm.
I think I certainly can get really lost in thinking, and to be
Mm-hmm.
able to see that these are impulses or reactions of consciousness that I can be curious about and have a bit of distance with. And so something like I am depression, or I'm bad because I'm depressed, or I'm so ashamed that I feel weak
Yes.
or tired right now. To be able to see that as a thought form, as a cloud that's floating by, if you imagine being at the apex of a mountain and you're just observing these things, is to be able to change your relationship, to not get to not stay caught in it
Mm-hmm.
and stuck in it. So coming back to congruence,
Mm-hmm.
so are you saying that when she observes someone saying something along the lines of I'm experiencing depression, it seemed in the way that you were sharing that story, she was able to say that with a sense of dignity, or a sense of
Yes.
like,
Yes. Yes.
um,
That's not who I am.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Or
Yes.
do even in other situations where people can really acknowledge, I'm really scared right now, or I'm about to do this presentation, I'm really worried about how it's going to go, which
Mm-hmm.
sounds different than, oh my God, like I'm so terrible at
Mm-hmm.
doing presentations. Like there's a different
Mm-hmm.
layer of
Mm-hmm.
mm, shame or self-contempt
Yes.
that exists in
Yes.
that.
Yes.
That it's like, what right do I have to even be in this space, or to be in this
Right.
like world, or to receive attention? And
Right.
I think it gets at that layer that Virginia talked a lot about with self-worth.
Mm-hmm.
And um, so congruence then seems to be built on a foundation of um, self-worth, or a
Mm-hmm.
connection to this I am period,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and a detachment from I am whatever the experience
Mm-hmm.
is.
Mm-hmm.
Um, can you share maybe any experiences you have with moving through that process with people that you work with, or your own experience of that, to maybe illustrate that a bit more? How that rooting in the self, in the I am, um, how that can happen?
Well, as a therapist, I am watching for it all the time.
Hmm.
Okay. Uh, and trying to help people find it themselves by saying, how do you feel toward the part of you that is sad right now? Or how do you feel toward the part of you that was reactive this morning with your partner? The minute that you begin to separate that out,
Mm.
the person is beginning to distance from the part. And then when I ask something like, what do you feel toward that part? And they say, oh, I feel really badly, then I know we have found the self. We have found the congruence. That place that is by its nature compassionate, or at least curious, and
Mm.
is calm and has perspective. So um, for me, it's, and then what happens when there is that feeling of compassion and acceptance and love from the I am, the self, toward that part that carries the wounds and the pain and the expectations and beliefs and all the yearnings, then you begin to see a shift in the face, in the body, in the skin tone.
Mm.
And it happens over and over and over again in therapy, and it's the most sacred moment because there is a light, there is a radiance that comes to that person,
Mm-hmm.
and you know that they are more now congruent because they have healed, they have integrated in a wounded part into them,
Right. Yeah.
instead of this being this incongruence of fighting off this part, holding it back, this part that carries the pain.
Mm.
Now that part has been taken in. It's
Yeah.
now part of your home, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
and I love your use of the word integration. I was listening to an interview with Dan Siegel, the renowned psychiatrist who talks a lot about presence and
Mm-hmm.
awareness, and he talked about health, sort of the foundation of health, it being integration, the integration and the synthesis of new information, and the way you're describing, it's like there are certain sub parts of our personality, and maybe they're related to particular emotional complexes like
Mm-hmm.
anger or worry or shame. And in those parts, when we can create a bit of space from them,
Mm-hmm.
not not denial, not rejection of the
Mm-hmm.
part or the experience, and but looking at it and exploring, well, how do you feel about this part?
Mm-hmm.
You're asking, I guess, the person to ground themselves in a perspective or in an energy where they're they're caring for a part of themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in that caring, then that's the process of integrating. Like
Yes.
how do I want to talk to my anger?
Yes.
And I think that's one of the things that I really appreciate about what I've learned from Virginia's work is that sometimes with some of these other models, and for example with externalizing and narrative therapy, they externalize but they don't bring back, or they
Mm.
externalize and they objectify without um, sort of seeing how that manifestation of an emotion is actually a resource that
Mm-hmm.
is part of the self. It's
Mm-hmm.
part of the life within
Yes.
the person. Like there's a
Yes.
very good reason why you feel emotions like anger and shame and anxiety.
Uh-huh.
They point to a map of something that needs to be taken care of. Not necessarily that the impulses of what comes from those emotions are healthy or whatnot,
Mm-hmm.
but there are certainly things that need to be taken care of. And I think um, when they're not sort of grounded in the biological reality of survival
Mm-hmm.
or of the need for protection,
Mm-hmm.
then sometimes these energies can be alienated and into being bad
Mm-hmm.
and not reframed or to be reintegrated as, they're part of life, and they're
Yes.
the message and the reframe of them. So I'll share an example. There was a young boy that was taking music lessons, and he got really upset with his teacher, and was swearing at the teacher, and the teacher was rebuking him, and then he just took off and ran out of the place. And we were at the session, and the mom was like, well, how, like, you can't run away, like that's no good. And there was kind of like this shaming of this coping
Yeah.
that the boy used of running away. And then I asked him, I said, like, where did you run to? And the mom was doing some grocery shopping, and he happened to be running right towards the grocery store. And so I said, I asked the mom, I said, you know, do you think it's a positive thing that he ran towards you when he was in trouble, when he was
Mm-hmm.
feeling scared and
Mm-hmm.
overwhelmed?
Mm-hmm.
And she said, I hadn't thought about it that way.
Mm-hmm.
And he hadn't thought about it that way either, because you just, when you're in survival, it's like, I need
Yep.
safety,
Yep.
I need love, I'm
Yep.
scared, I'm feeling rejected over here. But
Yeah.
what I could perceive being an outsider is like, you were running somewhere, and you were running towards your mom, you're running towards home, you're running towards nurturance or something.
Mhm. Yes.
And then we just had to work out a way that he could do that more consciously of what is a good safety plan. Like if you're not feeling good, what will
Yep.
you do? And
Yeah.
can you
Yeah.
call mom, or can you go to
Wow.
a spot that you agree on? But that's the energy. The energy in the behavior is, well, running away is like, he is the intention of the running away to make everyone upset, to scare them,
Mhm.
maybe on a certain level, but on another level, it's he's trying to cope with the overwhelming feeling
Sure.
that he's having in that moment. So to take that energy, um, and again, I guess connected, like when we're talking about the relationship between a mom and a son,
Mhm.
that's in the energy space of security and
Yep.
attachment and love.
Right.
And then taking that back to congruence, it's how do you reclaim all the parts of yourself?
Mhm.
Just like the mother reclaiming and saying, I love you, and let's work on the form of how you coped with your
Yes.
overwhelm,
Yes.
and find a different way so
Mm.
you can take care of yourself. But I think to me, it's like, it's not that everything you feel is positive. Congruence is not you feel positively or your behavior is perfect or something. It's just it's being able to deal honestly with the messiness of
Mhm.
life,
Mhm.
and I think we talked about truthfulness, being able to deal with it realistically and truly to what's happening,
Mhm.
um, not not lying about what's there or pretending that it's not there or something. So
I
yeah,
think congruence has a lot to do with conscious choice.
yes,
You
yeah,
know, really um, being conscious of what you are experiencing and being honest about that,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And then figuring out how you want to deal with that.
right, right.
Yeah. I also wanted to say something in terms of Dan Siegel
Hmm.
because I think that you pointed out something really beautiful about his work, which is that he called it, in order to integrate, you need to differentiate and link.
Hmm.
And that if you only differentiate out, I have a part of me that is reactive and runs when there's conflict, let's say,
Right.
and
Yeah.
avoids, and you don't link that back the way I'm talking about, of the self beginning to try to understand what's the fear, what are the beliefs you have about conflict, what are the yearnings, going through that whole process, because every part has its own iceberg, if you will,
Hmm.
and beginning to understand. The minute you can begin to go from that place to my part that avoids conflict and understand it, that's linking. And
Hmm.
that's a very important part of integration or
Yeah.
congruence, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I've been thinking about that because I'm starting to get more familiar with his work and the language that he uses around integration, and this differentiation and linking is the dialect between, I think, the human need for autonomy and belonging. So
Mm-hmm.
inside of our yearnings, there's a desire for me to be a unique, differentiated person, but then
Mm-hmm.
also to be connected with other people.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And I was thinking about his use of the words differentiation and linking, and it has a very strong resemblance to Jean Piaget's, the child psychologist's idea about assimilation and accommodation.
Mm. Okay. Wow.
Assimilation. Are you familiar with Jean
Yeah,
Piaget's
it's been
work?
a long time. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Remind
So
me.
he's a pretty renowned child developmental
Mm-hmm.
psychologist who studied stages of development, and
Mm-hmm.
I think his kind of model integrates evolutionary biology with psychology, and so he looked and created these concepts of assimilation and accommodation to look at the ways that children developed learning models and schemas. And so assimilation is essentially when I see a cat and I see another cat, I call them both cats. So it's basically I have a taxonomy of naming things, and my understanding fits here and it fits there. When you encounter um, a unique cat that has a unique name, like Bubbles, versus Charles over here, a different name of a cat, then you have to accommodate. You have to create a whole new structure of who this cat is, that's different. In terms of, in terms of human connection and relationship, it's like, well, when you are dating and then for the first time you move in and you're living with someone, that's a whole level of accommodation because you're not, you don't have, it's a new experience. How do we share chores? How do we pay the bills? It requires a whole level of accommodation. That's something unique. But it's all got to be connected to something that's grounded in what we're talking about in terms of the self. Because if these accommodations or these experiences are, I'm just doing what I should, and it's alienated from that self, then I think it creates a false self or a persona then that creates this distance between the self and whatever life is being created. And we've talked about that in terms of having family rules that can sometimes establish ways of being that have the person feeling quite alienated from themselves. And so, anyways, this dialogue that's happening between, okay, what fits within my model, and then what's challenging that to the point where I really need to look and make conscious choices about how I want to cope with that situation. I think, thinking about congruence as maybe a synonym for congruence is the process of integrating, and that these words that we're using like assimilation and accommodation the um, are the sub processes that allow for that to take place, right? So I have to say, and Virginia often said, we connect on the level of our sameness and we grow through our differences, which is exactly the same. It's like, okay, when I feel like I know who you are, then I feel like we can connect. When we reach maybe an impasse and we disagree on something, then how do we stay in the space of connection to learn from one another and to integrate new ways of being, new behaviors, um, cooperation on a new level, so that we can get to a state of harmony again. So it's this constant flux, and I think really entails the complexity of growth and the complexity of learning. That it's not simply, well, you behave this way and you're always truthful, and like that's I think very simplistic, but I think it is this combination of, well, there are things that are going to fit and then there are things that won't, and then what do you do with those things? Do you avoid them? Do you talk about them? Do you not? And how do you think we're doing?
Okay, I was thinking about a time when I was with Virginia, and she had somebody playing a part, their dishonest part, and they named it the Nixon part.
Okay.
And this, you were just saying, that when you get into always and never kinds of things about your parts, that's not integration, that's not congruence, because there is a kernel of energy within each of the parts that we have.
Yes.
That we need, and that's a resource, right?
Yes. Yes.
And so Virginia looks at her and she says, okay, so you think this is a bad part? Yeah. Well, can you think of a time when it would be important to be able to be dishonest?
Yeah.
And she says, I don't know. I want to be honest. Yeah, I honor that. You want to be honest, but what if somebody came to your door and said, and had a gun and said, I want to see your son.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think you would lie and say he's not home? She said, yeah. She said, good. So you have that part. It can be there. It can be a resource for you if you need it for safety.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. It's, I think anytime that we hear ourselves in black or white, all or nothing thinking, that is a part.
Mm-hmm.
The I am is not all or nothing thinking. And when I'm working with people, I have what I call a self detector and a parts detector. And the parts detector listens to the languaging around all or nothing. When we started out talking about I am bad, or or he always, or I never, any of that tells me that we're in a part, because the spirit does not go there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm thinking about how, the end of that sentence, I am bad or I am no good, there are these harsh conclusions that then kind of leave us stuck in a pattern of living.
Hmm.
And when you're describing um, the the idea of kind of losing my thought, but you know, the flow the flow of life is more the self, and then the parts can get stuck with a particular
Hmm.
behavioral pattern.
Hmm.
And I think, as mysterious as consciousness is, consciousness seems to be something like, it's described in the Tao as like a flowing river, and
Yes.
Alan Watts, the philosopher, he talked about how, you know, if you think about life as a flowing river, some of what people are doing is they're trying to paddle really hard upstream against the flow.
Hmm.
And what maybe a way of thinking about congruence is how to be aware of the flow of life and to utilize that energy with a sail, or with how you can join with that, so
Hmm.
that you're not fighting against life, but um, entering into a flow. And I think that speaks to the idea of harmony and integration,
Yes. Yes.
which is life, where we can fight against the aging process, but the aging process is a reality. We can fight against gravity, but gravity is a reality. It's a universal.
Hmm.
So how can we accept um, these aspects of reality, the limits of time and space and energy, and then um, in acknowledging them, create what's uniquely part of our own signature, what's valuable to us, what's meaningful to us. And I think that requires an attunement and a listening to the inner experience, the feelings, the dreams, and the hopes and the wishes we have of things that we want to experience. And I think that's why, in congruence, the freedom, the five freedoms, the freedom to see and hear, to feel, to comment, are so important, because they expose us to the very things that maybe if we had those rules we wouldn't see, and we
Yes.
could get stuck into
Yes.
a particular pattern. um, yeah.
Including seeing our own feelings. Because when you talk about acceptance, and I'm, I'm having to deal with acceptance of aging, right?
Hmm.
And it, if I go to the should, if I should accept this,
Right.
I'm going to feel incongruent inside because there's a part of me that's pissed about it,
Hmm.
because
Hmm.
my spirit's young, but my body is not.
Hmm. Hmm.
And but if I can have that rule that it's okay to see what's going on the outside and what's going on the inside, and break that and go, it's okay to see that I'm pissed about it,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, that then I can go into acceptance. But if I try to jump and not deal with the feelings first, and that awareness, that acceptance will not be congruent.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, and I think that's the difference between um, allowing yourself to have the experience versus working it out cognitively. Like you could work it out cognitively, intellectually, and to say what I should do, and then
Hmm.
think that you're doing that.
Yes,
But
yes.
to
As a
allow your
sophisticated therapist, right?
yes, exactly. Like good, strong CBT,
Yeah.
like, just rework that thought
Yep,
formation.
yep, yep, yep.
Um, I think because we were talking about the power of choice and how choice is a very important part of congruence. One way I've been thinking about those five freedoms as five choices. Just as much as they're freedoms, there are
Ooh,
also choices that
ooh,
I
I like
I
that.
can I have the freedom to choose to see and hear. I
Yeah.
have the freedom to say what I see and what I hear and what I feel. I have the freedom to choose to ask, and I have the freedom to take a risk. And that choice, in combination with the freedom, is, I think, the energy of responsibility,
Hmm.
that I can take ownership of what's going on inside of me and then
Yes.
what comes out of me.
Yes.
So I've been liking integrating that word
Hmm.
choice with the freedom.
Yes. Right. I
Um,
like that, Tim. Virginia uses this very strange word, choice maker,
yeah.
but I think it resonates. Like, okay, part of congruence and maturity is being a choice maker. So there's the awareness, that you've got a choice. There's taking the risk to make choices and do something, and then taking responsibility for that, all put together in that
Yeah.
one phrase, choice maker.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think those are, it's so positive to think about those. Um, I mean, if you have a functioning, healthy mind, that those are universals to be able to look and to experience what's going on and to make those choices. And then that becomes the integrating of life that, we're all, um, there is a, my friend once told me that life, life is like constantly handing you pieces of the puzzle. So if you imagine a 1,000-piece
Mm.
puzzle,
Yes.
and so as you get older, you get more pieces of the puzzle.
Mm-hmm.
And but what we do with that piece, so if we have an experience, if we just throw it away, if we don't honor it by really
Mm-hmm.
taking it and trying to integrate it with how does this fit with the whole picture I'm trying to create here,
Mm-hmm.
then that's where we're disempowering ourselves. Maybe we're making a choice to remain ignorant or to remain locked into a particular pattern because the pieces I had when I was 20 were great and I like
Mm-hmm.
that, but I don't maybe want to see the more of the picture.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing I like about that metaphor is that it really teaches us to respect people that are older than us, because if
Mm.
they
That's what I
if
was thinking too. Yeah.
yeah
Wow.
that if you meet someone that's been picking up their pieces and really respecting their life experiences
Yeah.
and growing
Yeah.
their wisdom,
Yeah.
that there's such a wealth of embodied knowledge,
Yes.
uh, wisdom that you can really gain a lot from.
Mm-hmm.
And that's exactly how I feel about you. You've
Oh,
got
thank you.
you've got a lot of the pieces to the puzzle, and you're helping me work out what the hell is this? What is this supposed to be? And um, so yeah, maybe we can finish with just checking in about our own sense of congruence within each of us,
Mm-hmm.
and just to kind of slow down our conceptual part of our conversation and have a physical experience of breath.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just noticing what this time together has been like. Um, from the level of feeling, I'm noticing that I'm feeling very energized and
Mm-hmm.
excited by the different things that we've shared and the the rallying back and forth,
Yes.
shared ideas, which I always love,
Yes. Yes.
and um, and also a feeling, I guess there's kind of a mystery of like I don't even know where we began, or like it is this, I think, this sense of flow, like this
Yeah.
conversation's felt,
Yeah.
mm, and and I feel connected to myself, and I notice as I'm kind of like trying to look at it, I'm coming out of it a bit, but yeah, I guess my wish right now is to be able to um, just have a physically embodied experience of being here with
Mm-hmm.
you
Mm-hmm.
and to appreciate our time together.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So thank you.
You're welcome. What flashed for me, Tim, between our interaction and some things that have happened for me recently in terms of feeling really appreciated, um, was I've been through two very serious cancer surgeries, and it
Mm.
feels as though the gift, the true gift of those, has been just being so happy and joyful to have connections like with you. I mean that I don't think before those surgeries it would have been at the level it is now. It's like every
Mm.
day is such a gift, you know, um, both in terms of our connection, in terms of what you add to me, which is tremendous. Your intellect is mind blowing to me. but also knowing that when my life ends, there are people like you who are going to be out there in the world who really get this and who will convey it. And that there is a very strong intellectual component, which you have. But what we've been talking about with this flow is something that you have to go through. You have to experience, and you don't get the flow by reading books.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And not
Yeah.
picking up the pieces, as you're saying, but also having maybe gone through experiences with satir training or any other kind of beautiful therapeutic experience or religious experience, whatever it is, where you become more loving and accepting of yourself
Mm-hmm.
and feel
Mm-hmm.
more connected not only to yourself but to humanity
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and to that oneness and the power of love. I think all of that
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
really there.
Yeah. We were talking about the differentiation and the linking and the ideas of assimilating experience. Like
Mm-hmm.
this is the same as what I know versus this is something new, and I have to really stretch myself and accommodate it
Mm-hmm.
into my model of the world. And I think one of the things that I've learned the most from being a therapist and from Virginia's work is to appreciate that the deepest learning happens in the deepest suffering, and that when you talk about your experiences with cancer, I mean, I can't relate to those experiences, but I can relate to my own struggles with um, human suffering, and
Mm-hmm.
that those have been the moments of greatest growth, and
Mm-hmm.
have really challenged me to
Mm-hmm.
how are you going to integrate this? How are you going to continue to move with life and to flow with life with the energies of
Mm-hmm.
who you really are being what I really value, like
Mm-hmm.
connection and love and
Yes. Yes.
curiosity and growth and
Yes.
all of that. How
Yes.
am I going to move through that while being loyal to what's at the root of me?
Mm-hmm.
And I think um, that we connect through our sameness and we grow through our differentness. Maybe another way of saying that is we enjoy and feel happy in moments of calm, and we really grow and expand ourselves to the moments of pain and suffering.
Yes.
Like
Yes.
and that they're all part of the yin and yang of livings.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, I appreciate you, and
Wow. Same here.
I think that's probably a good place to stop for today.
Yes.
Uh,
Always an amazing journey.
yeah, so we'll continue on with next time.